Hi everybody, it's Will from StormTheCastle.com, and here on Patreon you know me as Epic Fantasy. And this is installment 6 of my series where I travel around Europe, predominantly on a pilgrimage. I do 3 countries, Italy, France, and Spain. And in this installment we are going to take a look inside the Vatican Museum. I got lots of pictures for you, but I also have several insights about this museum. I think you're going to enjoy this. You're going to find some of this stuff very fascinating. The Vatican Museum is different. It's an experience that goes beyond the normal museum experience, and I'll explain some of that. First, let's take a look at its location. Here's a map of Rome, a tourist map of Rome, and there in the upper left-hand corner is Vatican City, and within the Vatican City there near St. Peter's Basilica is the Vatican Museum. And so I went to it, and my first impression was a little bit, I don't know how to describe it, a little bit of maybe disappointment. Well, disappointment's a strong word, but I shouldn't say that. Let me say that the main entrance here, I'll show you a picture here, the main entrance is very unpresupposing. I didn't expect this. I expected more pomp and circumstance, but this might be, well, that's quite wonderful. I'm grateful, and I like the idea that it's modest in its size, but this might be because it's 500 years old. The Vatican Museum is 500 years old, so 500 years ago, that this probably was quite the spectacular entrance. And let's take a look at it. The sculpture here on top is actually only about 100 years old, this new sculpture. And it's on the left is Michelangelo, and on the right is Raphael. So let's step inside, and I'm going to talk a little bit about some insights I have into the Vatican Museum that I really think you're going to find quite fascinating, which makes this museum very different from others. And I'm also going to make a comparison to a musical piece, because the similarities between this and a musical piece are, to me, were very significant. That in my mind, I couldn't get it out of my head. And I will actually play you, at the end of this video, I'll play you an excerpt from that classical music, symphonic piece. Let's go inside. The museum, of course, has a world-class variety of masterpieces in a lot of different media, including paintings, and in particular sculptures, bas reliefs, scientific instruments, maps, tapestries, frescoes, you name it. And I think it probably spans, I saw some stuff from the Etruscan period. What was that, like the 6,000 years BC, maybe? So, and I think there are about 20,000 pieces on display at any one time, although the museum, of course, has many more pieces, probably 60 or 80,000. But I'm not going to talk about any of that stuff. You can look at the pictures while I'm talking here and see just a few of the things. Actually, what I'm going to talk about is some other things about the museum. Like I said, I'm going to give you insights, and here's the first insight. The best labyrinth is the labyrinth you don't realize you're in. And that's what we have here at the Vatican Museum. And I'll explain what I mean. You go to the Vatican Museum, everyone goes to the Vatican Museum, and I think they get about 5 million visitors a year, which is astonishing. And you see those, some people in all of my pictures. I can't help but have people in the pictures. They're everywhere, right? But everyone wants to go to the Sistine Chapel, right? That's the goal. So I would imagine that 4.5 million people would enter the museum and go straight to the Sistine Chapel, and that's fine. You can do whatever you want to do. But they very carefully crafted this labyrinth, so that's not easy to do. And I don't mean, well, they force you to go through a lot of other stuff in kind of obfuscated ways. They don't make it easy for you to get to the Sistine Chapel. And there's I'm sure there's a couple of reasons for this. One is the masterpieces of humanity fill this building. And you should experience some of those too. But also another reason is, just pure traffic of people, of humanity, the sea of people that, so they disperse people in different ways. They even move things around on the fly. Security moves things around on the fly to kind of guide people in different directions and stuff, and to try to keep the crowds controlled till you can eventually get to the Sistine Chapel, which is pretty much the end of the whole museum experience. And so that's the first insight. I think that's really quite understandable, but people don't realize it. That's the best labyrinths in the world are the labyrinth you don't realize you're in. And that's a theme I had, and I'll wax poetic here, I guess. Talk about my book, The Left-Handed Sword. I get to this point where I was like, I'm going to put my character through just everything I can possibly put him through, and see how he responds. The main protagonist in the novel, and after all this stuff happens and all these things happen to him, and he eventually finds himself in a labyrinth, and with no way out, with a party of others, and just as things get their grimmest, they've run out of food, they've run out of water, things are really bad. I'm stuck as a writer. I'm like, what do I do? How do I work his way out of this labyrinth? And I just couldn't come up with something that was right. And so I put the novel aside had to be at least a year. And every once in a while I go back to it and give it some thought. And then one day the solution to the labyrinth just came to me. Just like that. Just came to me. I don't even think I was thinking about it. It just popped right in my head. And that's the mysterious way that our minds work, right? And that was it. That I could get our protagonist out of the labyrinth and continue on with his adventure in his world. So anyway, that's a little bit of a side note, but I am fascinated by labyrinths, and I did realize that the Vatican Museum is a very subtly crafted labyrinth that you don't realize you're in. Okay, so let me give you my second insight into the Vatican Museum that separates it from all other museums in the world. And I've been to quite a few museums. I've been to the Louvre in Paris and the Met in New York and a lot of museums. This one, the building itself, the rooms inside, the architecture, all of this is a masterpiece. You can just feel it and see it. The structures, the structure itself, the paintings on the ceilings, the frescoes on the walls, the tapestries hanging on the walls, just how the building is designed on the inside, the rooms, the gold ceilings, and all of that is just magnificent. Now, and you see some of this in other museums, and I've talked about this in other museum videos, like to look up when you're in a museum, because oftentimes there's things on the ceiling and people pass right by it, don't realize it. But the whole interior of this museum is just a spectacular masterpiece in architecture and design and layout, and everything has been carefully thought out by generations of people over hundreds of years. It's just, the building itself is a masterpiece. So now let me give you my third insight, third of four. And this one involves something called the Bramante staircase. And I'll show you a picture. I didn't get any pictures of it. I don't know why. But I got this picture off of Wikipedia to get an idea of her. Everyone who exits the Vatican Museum has to exit down the Bramante staircase. And the original one, this is a replacement. The original one was in 1505, I think. And this replacement now is 100 years old. and quite magnificent and beautiful. And it's a double helix, which means you can have traffic going up, people walking up one half of the helix, and people walking down the other half of the helix, and they don't cross each other's paths. It's remarkable. And here's the insight about the Bramante staircase. After you've been through the Vatican Museum and you've seen the riches of the world, everything, and you finally make it to the Sistine Chapel, which is the masterpiece that the chapel itself is the masterpiece that rises above all other masterpieces in the world. You witness the resurrection, the creation of Adam, and after all of that, you descend the Bramante staircase back to earth, down back to earth. And there's symbology in that. And also, I think, I have to tease this out a little bit, but I also think there's symbology in the fact that it's a double helix, just like our DNA is. So, I think, the Bramante staircase is quite remarkable. It's really a thing, and it's the perfect way to descend back down to earth after witnessing everything you witnessed inside the Vatican Museum. So now let's move on to my fourth and final insight for you. And this one is the musical one. I kept having this nagging thought at me that the whole museum itself is a musical piece. And the musical piece that came to my mind was Beethoven's Fifth. And not the first movement. Everyone knows the first movement of Beethoven's Fifth. That's the dun 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 dun. Right? Everyone knows that one. But no, I wasn't thinking that. I was thinking the third and fourth movements of that symphony, and particularly the bridge between the third and fourth movements. And the reason being is that you have this orchestrated piece with all the I don't know how to describe it. The best way to say is that you bring this whole orchestra with different parts, have their little pieces, and you can discern all these various things going on, just like in the museum, and it goes in different directions, and it builds to the crescendo, this amazing crescendo that is the Sistine Chapel. So as you're progressing through the third and fourth movements of Beethoven's symphony, you are progressing through the Vatican Museum, and the crescendo ends with the masterpiece of masterpieces, the Sistine Chapel. So so that's it. This is my video about the Vatican Museum, and I will end it with some pictures. Well, we'll enter the Sistine Chapel, kind of. And I have an excerpt of part of Beethoven's Fifth of the third and fourth movements for your enjoyment. And I had one more thing to say. What was it? And then after all of that, we would exit the Bramante staircase back to Rome and back to reality. The Bramante spiral staircase. Thanks very much for listening. I will be coming in now. I think I'm going to do one more Rome, and then we're going to move on because I have a lot to cover. I think we're going to move on to either Florence or Pisa. And also, all of these pictures for you, my patrons, all of these pictures of Rome that I have, and there's a lot of them, I'm going to upload them somewhere so you can download them, look at them, print them, do whatever you want with them, of course, as my gratitude to you for supporting me in my endeavors. Thank you.